Ever wonder why you just can't say no to that slice of cake or piece of chocolate? It might not be your fault. Your body could be hardwired for those cravings. So if sugar feels like an addiction, you're definitely not alone. I'm Corey Applin, host of Compound Action, How Small Steps Create Massive Change. And today we're uncovering the surprising science behind why we crave carbs and why we crave sweets and how to break that cycle. For a lot of folks out there, cravings feel like a tug of war with the brain. They intuitively know that they don't need another bowl of pasta or another chocolate bar or soda, but there's this nagging in their brain that just won't go away. Cravings don't just appear out of nowhere. They can take on a life of their own, evolving into detailed plans. It's not just about the food. You begin to imagine the entire process. You map out the journey, where you'll go, what you'll order, how it will feel to finally satisfy that urge. It's as though the cravings become a mission, something that requires your full attention, planning, and anticipation. Every step is savored in your mind long before the first bite ever touches your lips. A craving is like a symphony where each instrument represents a different sensation: taste, texture, warmth. Your brain is the conductor, orchestrating a perfect harmony that it desperately wants to hear again. And the only way to play it is through that specific food. And for many, shortly after the craving is satisfied, it's met with a feeling of guilt or regret. You may be surprised to learn that there may be a physiological reason in the body that's causing this incessant nagging, and that the solution has nothing to do with just avoiding the food, but rather correcting the underlying problem to allow the cravings to go away on their own. I'm going to uncover the many causes of cravings and, most importantly, how to correct them on today's episode. So definitely stick around. Now, I can break up the causes of cravings into 4 distinct categories: biological, psychological, dietary patterns, and microbiome imbalance. Now, there's a little overlap here, but for the case of the explanation, it helps to be able to break them up into different categories. So first, I'm going to start with the biological factors. Number 1 on my list is hormone resistance. And insulin resistance goes for sure at the top of my list. I've spoken out a lot about insulin resistance and its relation to a lot of poor health outcomes, I should say. But insulin resistance can lead to fluctuating blood sugar levels, which causes frequent hunger and cravings for quick sources of energy like sugars and carbs. And when cells become less responsive to insulin, glucose, the sugar, remains in the bloodstream, which leads to an increase in hunger signals. So there's a quote from a book, Diabetic Epidemic and You, this by medical doctor Joseph R. Kraft, where he says insulin resistance often goes unnoticed because it doesn't immediately show up as a symptom. But behind the scenes, it's driving those frequent sugar cravings, urging you to reach for quick fixes that temporarily boost blood sugar, but ultimately contribute to the cycle of weight gain and metabolic dysfunction. Now, there's another form of hormone resistance that not as many people are aware of. It's called leptin resistance. Now, leptin is a hormone. It's produced in your fat cells, and it shoots up to your brain. It's supposed to let you know when you're full. It also helps us burn fat. That's another one of the very important roles of leptin. But when leptin becomes resistant, which is very common with weight gain and obesity, we never quite get that signal that we're full. So when someone's resistant, with the signaling impaired, it leads to overeating and an increase in cravings, especially for sugars and carbs. Now, the third one on the list here, for sure, is going to resonate with a lot of people, and it has to do with the neurotransmitters serotonin and dopamine. These are things that make us feel good. They're involved in our reward systems. So carbohydrates and sugars, they're linked to the production of serotonin. So serotonin, again, it's a neurotransmitter that contributes to feelings of well-being. They just make us feel good. Consuming carbs, especially simple sugars, will temporarily increase the serotonin, leading to a temporary mood boost. Dopamine is another neurotransmitter. It's associated with our reward systems, which is also released during sugar consumption. And so what dopamine does is it reinforces the craving and makes it more habitual. The fourth thing on the list under the biologic category has to do with stress and specifically adrenal function. Chronic stress and adrenal dysfunction can lead to increased cortisol levels. Now, most people have heard of cortisol. That's our stress hormone. Cortisol on its own can raise blood sugar and insulin levels. So this is going to drive those cravings for high energy foods like the sugars and carbs. Now, the second category, I know that a lot of people are going to, listen to this section and say, yeah, that's definitely me. The second category has to do with the psychological things that contribute to sugar cravings, well, sugar and carb cravings. First on the list is emotional eating. So many people use food as a coping mechanism for stress, anxiety, or depression, and it's linked to what we're talking about with serotonin and dopamine. Sugars and carbs are particularly appealing in these situations because of that quick mood boosting effects. To be clear, they're not long lasting, right? We eat those sugars and carbs, we temporarily feel really good. We get that warm and cozy sensation, but it goes away just as quickly as it comes. When you crave something, it's not just about the food you're after. It's like the memory it brings back, a time, a place, a feeling. It's like your brain's trying to teleport you back to a moment of comfort or joy where that food was the centerpiece. It's essentially an attempt to recapture an elusive feeling of contentment, of being in the right place at the right time when everything just felt right. A craving isn't just a signal from your stomach, it's often a message from your emotions. When you're feeling down, stressed, nostalgic, or even bored, your brain might latch onto a food that once made you feel good. So it's not just about the calories, it's about feeding an emotional need. The craving is a way to fill a gap, to bring back a feeling of comfort, even if it's just for a moment. And this is from Fat Chance, Beating the Odds Against Sugar, Processed Food, Obesity, and Disease. This is by another medical doctor, Robert Lustig, who says sugar consumption lights up the brain's reward pathways, much like addictive drugs do. The more sugar you eat, the more your brain craves it, creating a vicious cycle that's difficult to break without conscious effort and lifestyle changes. Which brings us right to the second part of the psychological aspects of cravings, which is habitual behavior. Frequently doing anything leads it to become a habit. I highly encourage you to listen to my episode on what makes a habit, where I do a much deeper dive on this. But essentially, anything can become a habit. It's your brain's way of trying to conserve energy and shortcut a process. So, frequent consumption of sugary or carb rich foods can create a habit loop where the brain expects a reward after eating these foods, which just reinforces the cravings over time. The third category, of course, is dietary patterns. Now, these are typically, I don't want to say easy, the simplest to break. Diets high in carbohydrates and low in protein lead to blood sugar level spikes and crashes, which perpetuates these cravings. Protein helps with satiate. Protein helps with feelings of fullness. So we feel satisfied. That's going to reduce the desire for additional carbs and additional sugars. Also, under this category would be nutrient deficiencies. Deficiencies in like specific nutrients, though, magnesium, chromium, zinc, can lead to an increase in cravings for sugars. Those nutrients play a role specifically in glucose metabolism and insulin sensitivity. Artificial sweeteners I'd put in this category too. They're often used as a substitute for sugar, but some artificial sweeteners, they trigger the cravings for sweet foods by maintaining, we'll just say like a preference for the sweet taste. Like if you're always eating sugar or sweet tasting foods, I should say, not necessarily containing sugar. If you're always eating sweet tasting foods, it reinforces your brain's desire for things that are sweet tasting. But the artificial sweeteners don't actually satisfy the energy needs, which can perpetuate more cravings for sweet tasting foods. There's another quote from a book, Food, What the Heck Should I Eat? Love the name, by another medical doctor, Mark Hyman, who says balancing your blood sugar by focusing on whole, nutrient dense foods is key to curbing cravings. When you fuel your body properly, those intense urges for sugars and refined carbs start to diminish, replaced by steady energy and improved health. Fourth category here, I'll jump right into, has to do with a microbiome imbalance. I love this. This is the gut-brain axis. Again, I mentioned that in a previous episode on microbiome. All of these things that I've spoken on previously seem to contribute to sugar and carb cravings, but specifically the gut-brain axis, an imbalance in gut bacteria, particularly a dominance in sugar-loving bacteria, can drive cravings for more sugars and more carbs. And because our gut is connected to our brain through the vagus nerve, the gut brain axis plays a really critical role in directing our food preferences. So, dysbiosis can contribute to unhealthy cravings, like what we're talking about today, the sugars and the carbs. I'll share another quote from a book called The Mind-Gut Connection, How the Hidden Conversation Within Our Bodies Impacts Our Mood, Our Choices, and our overall health. This is by Dr. Emran Mayer, who says the gut-brain axis is a powerful force in influencing our food choices. An imbalance in gut bacteria can lead to cravings for sugar and carb-laden foods, as the microbiomes themselves demand the fuel they thrive on, driving our eating behavior. So this is really interesting because what we're essentially saying is that the types of foods that we eat ultimately are going to direct the types of foods that we crave more of. So by eating sugary, carb-heavy foods, there is a chemical process that happens, spikes in blood sugar levels, those types of things that can make us crave more sugary foods. But also this connection in the brain may make it feel like a psychological cause of the craving, even if it has a physiological basis. But a lot of people listening are already thinking like, yeah, I got it. Like I'm already there though. I have the cravings. I'm craving these things all the time. What the heck should I do about it? First and foremost, dietary adjustments. Again, they're the simplest route to go. Not always easy, but they are the simplest route to go because oftentimes working with the physiology will in turn have a positive impact on the psychology. So first and foremost, put a emphasis on increasing protein intake, increasing intake of healthy fats, increasing fiber intake. And you notice how I don't say like focus on reducing sugars, focus on reducing carbs, because initially, if you're increasing the intake of those other things, it's going to naturally crowd out the sugary, carb heavy foods. And then over time, because this feeling of fullness that comes with proteins, fats, fibers, those types of things, because Now your blood sugar levels aren't going to be spiked the same way that they were before. Cravings for the sugars and carbs should come down. Now, if you want the fast track for reducing sugar and carb cravings, now, first and foremost, I always recommend, whenever I'm recommending supplements, I always recommend pairing that with proper eating habits because, um, taking supplements without eating properly is like trying to pour water on a fire while you're still pouring gasoline on it. You have to take away the gasoline, and that's through eating good, healthy foods. Once you're doing that, then taking vitamin supplementation, the impact is so much more powerful. When it comes to sugar and carb cravings, though, there are 5 specific recommendations I would make. The first 3 have to do with those things I mentioned earlier, taking chromium, magnesium, and zinc. Those have all been shown to reduce sugar and carb cravings. Also, omega-3 fatty acids. So if you're not getting enough good fats from your diet, certainly you can supplement with omega-3 fatty acids, which can also lower sugar cravings. The 5th is an herb called berberine. And I've mentioned berberine on the podcast before. It's Berberine. And this herb has shown to be just as effective as many of the medications out there at lowering blood sugar levels, keeping it in a normal, healthy range. And the more you're able to regulate blood sugar levels and prevent these spikes, the more sensitive your body is going to be to insulin, right? We talked about insulin resistance earlier. If your body is sensitive to insulin, that in turn will help lower cravings for the sugars and the carbs. Another strategy is mindful eating, just awareness, being mindful of hunger cues and distinguishing between true hunger and emotional cravings can help in making healthier food choices. There's also lifestyle changes, regular exercise, for example. And when I talk about exercise, I'm really talking about just getting your body moving because a lot of times the mental picture people create when you talk about exercise is going to the gym, lifting weights, throwing bars, those types of things. When I talk about regular exercise, I'm just talking about moving your body. Walking counts. Walking counts as exercise. Gardening counts as exercise. Any of those things. Because any sort of physical activity improves insulin sensitivity, it reduces stress, and boosts overall mood, all of which can help reduce cravings for sugars and carbs. Stress management kind of goes hand in hand with that. Exercise is one way to manage stress, but also things like meditation, yoga, deep breathing exercises, engaging in hobbies. All of those things can lower cortisol and reduce the urge for emotional eating. Another one that may surprise a lot of people is making sure to get adequate amounts of sleep. In addition to helping regulate cortisol, right, the stress hormone, poor quality of sleep or lack of sleep increases ghrelin levels and lowers leptin levels. So I mentioned leptin earlier. Leptin makes us feel full. Ghrelin makes us feel hungry. So you imagine you're not getting enough sleep. It's going to increase those hunger signals, and it's going to lower those signals that make us feel full. And so when you increase hunger, cravings kind of go hand in hand with that, especially for the high carb foods. So prioritizing sleep, making sure getting at least 7 to 9 hours of continuous sleep can help maintain hormonal balance and reduce the cravings. Last thing that kind of coincides with what I mentioned in terms of the causes, improve gut health. Now, first and foremost, when it comes to improving gut health, I always recommend the dietary changes. When you're eating good quality foods, you get better diversity in the gut microbiome. So people talk a lot about probiotics, getting the good bacteria in the gut. Probiotics don't mean anything without prebiotics, though. Prebiotics are fiber. Fiber is what feeds the good, healthy bacteria in our stomach, and they crowd out the bad bacteria. There's 2 different types of fiber. We have soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. For most people, they don't have to focus too much on that. If you're eating Really just good sources and diverse sources of fruits and vegetables. You're going to be getting a healthy mixture of insoluble and soluble fiber. You're going to feed the good gut bacteria, and the microbiome is going to flourish. Some things that can help it though are fermented foods like yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi. I've mentioned this before. When I eat eggs in the morning, I usually put like a kimchi spread on it, just as my own way of encouraging good, healthy microbiome. But remember, again, when we're feeling good in our gut, when we have diversity and a healthy microbiome in our gut, that in turn sends better signals up to our brain, which in turn can lower sugar and carb cravings. So you'll see, even as prevalent as sugar and carb cravings are, there's a lot of strategies out there to potentially lower them. And, of course, this isn't something where you should try everything at once. I always recommend just breaking things down into the simplest components first, because everybody's lifestyle is different. Choosing the strategy that's going to be the easiest for you to integrate into your daily life without feeling overwhelming, without feeling like it's just adding a lot to the plate. Start there, because chances are it's going to work at least to some degree. Once the craving starts to come down, it's going to become easier to start to integrate and implement some of the other strategies. And if at the end of it, you're finding that you're still struggling, it's totally okay to reach out to a behavioral health coach. I say this all the time, and I'll repeat myself again. Getting a coach is okay. Having someone to hold your hand and walk side by side with you, especially when trying to make changes that might feel or seem daunting in the beginning, could be exactly what you need to be able to achieve your goals. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. Stay healthy out there, and I'll catch you on the next one.